Better Call Saul is almost at an end, and I really don't know how to process that information. I really am gonna miss the hell out of that show when it's finally off the air. It's unambiguously become one of my all-time favorite TV shows, better even than Breaking Bad in my opinion. It's one of the most finely crafted TV shows I've ever seen. The acting, the directing, the camera work, the music, the characters, the plot, it's all just so amazing that the only way I can possibly encapsulate it is to say, bravo, Vince, bravo. I'm gonna miss the memes a lot too. I think it's fair to say that Breaking Bad as a franchise creates some of the worst memes of all time, and I hate myself for laughing at so many of them. Kid named Finger.
Walter, put your dick away, Walter.
Now, when it comes to Better Call Saul, there are indeed plenty of topics one can possibly discuss that are all very interesting in their own right. How big is Chuck's dick? How on earth did Vaz from Far Cry 3 end up in Albuquerque? Was Lalo Salamanca the first ever VTuber? And why is Jimmy slipping all the time? Is there something wrong with his shoes? And while these topics are all very interesting and you'll sound incredibly smart and cool if you talk about them with your friend group, they're not the topic of today's video. Instead, I want to talk about something that the show left behind many seasons ago at this point. The relationship between Jimmy and Chuck that lasted over the first 3 seasons of the show and made up a pretty big cornerstone of it in the early days. Oh, and spoilers for Better Call Saul and maybe Breaking Bad too. I don't know yet. You should probably watch both of those shows, they're really good. Oh wow, look at me, making controversial statements by recommending 2 of the most critically acclaimed TV shows of all time. Wow. So, why exactly am I subjecting myself to all this chicanery? Well, it's mainly because I think the relationship between these 2 characters is pretty fascinating to think about and discuss. It's some incredible acting and character writing on the part of the show, and it's really interesting to think about, or at least I think so. It should probably go without saying, but Bob Odenkirk and Michael McKean are both fantastic in the roles they play. Their chemistry and dynamic is such that I really think the show wouldn't have been able to find its footing in the early days without them. If they hadn't managed to find such a strong dynamic between them, we might not be watching sad black and white Cinnabon Man to this day. I also wanted to discuss this because I feel that the fandom has a tendency to dramatically oversimplify their relationship, which is a shame because it's a very complex dynamic they have. Right off the bat, it would be easy for people to dismiss Chuck as a cranky old crazy person who's simply evil and has it out for his brother just for the sake of being a dick. And you know what? Chuck doesn't exactly help himself in that regard. You know, the way he uses all manner of underhanded tactics to try and sabotage Jimmy's career at every turn, keeping him from joining HHM and letting Howard be the fall guy for that. Or manipulating Jimmy's emotions so he could get his brother to incriminate himself on tape and then get him disbarred. Not cool, Chuck. But on the other hand, Chuck isn't exactly wrong when he says Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun. It's pretty evident across Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad that the guy is incredibly savvy when it comes to manipulating the law for his own ends. I mean, honestly, you leave Jimmy alone for 5 minutes and he's already doing some type of Bugs Bunny shit. He can scheme up anything at the drop of a hat. I firmly believe that this man could meet Joseph Joestar in a battle of wits and might even do well before Joseph kicks the shit out of him. And few people know Jimmy quite as well as Chuck does. If he believes that Jimmy was a threat with a law degree, he's kind of got a good hunch to go off of. Of course, it's just as easy to argue that Jimmy was on the straight and narrow back when he was working in the mailroom and getting himself by on distance learning. You know, that job that Chuck gave him to get him out of trouble that one time. My brother in Christ, there were children underneath that sunroof. You're going on the sex offenders registry. Where was I going with this again? Oh, yeah, right. The chimp with the machine gun. I think it's fair to assume that if Jimmy had just been allowed to join HHM, he probably wouldn't have gone back to his old ways. God knows he seemed to be on the straight and narrow back when he was doing the bar exam. As it happens, it's rather difficult to do any Ed, Edd and Eddy bullshit if you're busy wrapped up in one of the most complicated exams in the world. I should know, I've been forcibly ejected from the bar several times. Please let me have a law degree. I'm normal and can be trusted with influence over law and order. But if there is one thing about Chuck's character that's clear, it's that he has an almost religious reverence for the law.
The law is sacred. If you abuse that power, people get hurt. This is not a game. You have to know on some level, I know you know I'm right. You know I'm right.
The idea of Jimmy having a law degree was just something his morals couldn't abide. He couldn't stand the idea of his former con artist brother getting involved in that line of work. Moreover, he's also a firm believer in the idea that people can't change, especially Jimmy. Or, at least, that's one way to interpret Chuck's attitude toward his brother. It's just as easy to believe that he's operating entirely off of envy towards Jimmy, and he even seems to suggest as much himself.
I worked my ass off to get where I am. And you take these shortcuts and you think suddenly you're my peer? You do what I do because you're funny and you can make people laugh? I committed my life to this!
Not that Chuck was seemingly aware of this when he was going off on one of his very long and laborious rants. But for all his self-evident talents and accomplishments, there is one area which Jimmy has always excelled in over him. It's charisma. It's the one thing that Chuck has seemingly never had. Even at the best of times, Chuck has a tendency to come across as stiff and uptight compared to Jimmy, who is always carefree and very personable. Even when Jimmy's not out there slipping around and causing a con, he has a very natural way with people. He can read them and manipulate them, or just understand them in ways that Chuck seemingly can't. I mean, one of them was able to get the copy shop guy on his side with little difficulty, while the other one had a psychotic breakdown and then did a silly funny haha falling down moment, so that about explains it all right there. All of Jimmy's natural charisma does stand in stark contrast to Chuck, who is just kind of a perpetual stick in the mud. And so, while it's not exactly wrong for Chuck to believe Jimmy with a law degree would be dangerous given his con man nature, I don't think that's the exact reason he had for keeping Jimmy away from HHM all those years. I mean, Chuck isn't exactly subtle when it comes to his envy towards Jimmy, and it's possible he feared Jimmy would excel in law just as he did when it comes to people. The law is Chuck's whole thing. He ended up sacrificing just about everything else for the sake of his career, which left him with not much else when everything was said and done. So, naturally, it's something that Chuck would end up being pretty protective over. But, having said all of that, it does seem that Chuck, at one point at least, did have some faith in Jimmy. He ended up being the guy's witness at the bar exam after all. Maybe he did genuinely care at that point in time, or maybe he was just trying to keep up appearances, not wanting Jimmy to suspect him. There comes a point in character analysis where, eventually, you're just gonna slip into baseless speculation, and I guess we'll never know exactly what Chuck thought or felt when it came to his brother, or at the very least, that whole subject was very muddled and complex to him. And yet, that's part of the reason why it's such a compelling and gripping part of the narrative. It's the reason why the show was able to get its footing early on, and probably what helped propel it to the heights it has now. Aw damn, I went and made myself sad with all that crazy gushing I was just doing. I really am gonna miss this show. Oh well, at least we have the upcoming Lyle spin-off to look forward to. Or, more episodes of Slip and Jimmy, I guess.